Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Colonnati. Today I'm going to do the third and final part of my mini-series on my favorite first lines from books in my collection. These are all books that I've read and I recently rediscovered the first sentences of them and thought, these are really good. So I'm going to share them with you and try to tell you why I think they're good and why I like them. So let's jump straight into it with these last 10. The first one is Annihilation by Jeff VanderMeer, which now that I'm thinking about it, may be the first book I ever read because of BookTube. I'm pretty sure it is. I remember very vividly the way that this book is written, and I'll just read you the first line and then tell you all the things that strikes me about it. The tower, which was not supposed to be there, plunges into the earth in a place just before the black pine forest begins to give way to swamp, and then the reeds and wind-gnarled trees of the marsh flats. The twist here, that I think is great, is the tower. The first words are the tower, which immediately makes you think, oh, I'm looking up at this thing soaring above me, until it says it plunges into the earth. This isn't a tower, it's an anti-tower, so why would you call it a tower? It's like everything's being upended in this. This next one is Serpentes Rise by Max Gladstone, which is the first book published, at least, in the craft sequence. I read this long enough ago with half a brain, I think, so I don't remember anything about it except the dude who's running around smoking a cigarette, and that is actually really important. But this first line, it just took me back to the tone of this world in some way. The goddess leaned over the card table and whispered, "Go all in." You know, gods and goddesses being involved in the affairs of mortals, and at a card game, are they betting? What is this? I love that combination. This next one is Summer and Orcus by Ursula Vernon under her pen name T. Kingfisher. I know I've read the first line of this in a video at some point. It was very intriguing at the time, and now that I've read the book, I still really like it. Once upon a time there was a girl named Summer whose mother loved her very much. This is such a Vernon sentence. If you've ever read stories or books by her, if you know anything about her personality, or kind of this running joke, I think, with Vernon, that she sets out to write like kid stories or relatively innocent fantasy, and then they go horribly awry and very dark and turn into something completely different. That's the thing that Vernon does. Anyway, this first sentence feels to me like it's a riff on your classic fairy tale opening. It's funny, but it also starts veering into dark territory. Maybe it's not healthy to be loved by your parent so very much. The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster, a book that I read most of my lifetime ago. I actually read this for school, not for an English course. I read it for vocabulary lessons in grade school. I don't even know if public or private school systems have vocabulary lessons, but I was homeschooled and we did. I enjoyed the heck out of them. This is also a great book to teach you vocabulary. I didn't remember the first sentence of this until I read it, and then it took me straight back to grade school when I read it and my reaction to it then. There was once a boy named Milo who didn't know what to do with himself. Not just sometimes, but always. And I think I remember this, and I think it kind of struck me the first time I read it as a child, because I am not like this. If I recall, this is about a boy who is bored. Like it says, he doesn't know what to do with himself, and when I was a kid, I was not like that. I could go off and escape into my head and entertain myself just fine within the confines of my head. I knew exactly what to do with myself whenever I had any downtime. And for some reason, that very difference between myself and the character makes me remember that a lot. Next is The Vorrh by Brian Catling. Have to say, this is not one of my favorite reads ever. It was almost too weird and disturbing in some places for me. But I remember the opening bit of this, and it's another one that the image, in just this one sentence, it implies so many things. The bow I carry with me, I made of est. Est being a woman. It's like, is that disturbing? The implication being this narrator has made a bow out of the body, out of the bones of another person. And why? I would assume it's an honorary gesture or a magical ritual one. But why? The whole book is kind of like that. Maybe someday I'll read the sequels. One of my favorite authors is Lois McMaster Bujold, and I wish that I had more of her books in this little series, but I really only found one that had a first sentence that was really cool, and this is Cryo Burn, one of the much later books in the Vorrh saga. So this is kind of military science fiction. And I like this sentence just on its own. There's an explanation immediately following in the next paragraph, but this image in a science fiction novel, it's great. Angels were falling all over the place. The Privilege of the Sword by Ellen Kushner, which is the second book in the Riverside series. I love the series. I love this book in particular. No one sends for a niece they've never seen before just to annoy her family and ruin her life. Since I've read the entire series, I kind of know which character is being addressed with this statement, some subtle commentary. He's my favorite character, and yes, yes, he would do just that. These next two books are both by Neal Stephenson, which reminds me that I really need to get back to reading Stephenson's back catalog. I think I only have like 2 or 3 books left to read. I could do that easily, I just haven't. So this first one is Seveneves, one of those books that I regret not doing a decent review of when I read it, but I was kind of overwhelmed with all the feels at the time. This first sentence is, "The moon blew up without warning and for no apparent reason," setting off the next 5,000 years of history, which will radically change the human race. The other one is Anathem, which I think is the first Stephenson book I ever read. And at some point, I shared the first sentence of this in a video because I remember rediscovering it at that time and really liking it. I love this because it asks such a WTF question that without any context, it's like, why are you asking me that? "Do your neighbors burn one another alive?" was how Fra Aurolo began his conversation with Artisan Fleck. And lastly, the 30th book, the 30th first sentence, is the longest one, and I've kind of saved it for last because it is so long. This is Too Light the Lightning by Ada Palmer, the first book in the Terra Ignota series. And I really wanted to include this one because, one, when I read it for the first time, I was like, wow, I'm in for something very unusual, aren't I? But having reread it a couple of times, it's kind of your classic opening sentence where the narrator directly addresses the reader and says, this is how I'm going to tell you this story, and maybe apologizes in some way. That happens a lot. But it's also talking about the style and demonstrating the style in which the entire series is written, which I think is one of the most important things to know what you're getting into when reading these books. "You will criticize me, reader, for writing in a style 600 years removed from the events I describe, but you came to me for explanation of those days of transformation which left your world the world it is. And since it was the philosophy of the 18th century, heavy with optimism and ambition, whose abrupt revival birthed the recent revolution, so it is only in the language of the Enlightenment, rich with opinion and sentiment, that those days can be described." Yeah, that is all one sentence, by the way. I read until the period. So that is that. That is my little mini-series of my favorite first lines from 30 of the books in my collection. Hopefully someday I'll do another installment in this when I've read some more books. Also makes me want to go through some of the books that I have on ebook or audiobook as well, since those really shouldn't be left out, but I will save that for a future endeavor. So do let me know if you liked any of these first sentences. Maybe share with me and the others down in the comments your own favorite first sentences of books. And thank you very much for watching. I will talk to you again soon, and until then, bye.